lelaki apa macam tu? Sanggup biarkan anak lelaki aku mati.
தண்ணி குடிச்சிருக்கியா? கொஞ்சம் குடிச்சேன்.
யாரோ ஒரு சின்ன மலாய் பொண்ணு என்கிட்ட வந்து வேற யாராச்சும் அந்த மாதிரி ஆரஞ்சு ஜாக்கெட்டை போடுவாங்கன்னு கேட்டா.
Why are you following me?
Welcome to RazorPop. Today we'll be talking about Salawati, which is a new film directed by Mark Grigoroff and starring Ganesh Supriya as well as Fish Cha. Now, we'll be talking about the film in a while because I think what's interesting about the film is that it deals with race relations in Singapore, which is a very sensitive topic, one that even Singaporean filmmakers wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole, I think. It depicts what happens when the lives of various characters of various races intersect during the accidental drowning of a boy. Okay, the movie opens tomorrow, is that right?
Opens tomorrow, yes.
Yeah. Okay, we'll talk about it in a while. In the meantime, I'll give you a capsule review of the new films that open this week.
People ask the question, what's a RocknRolla? And I'll tell them.
Director Guy Ritchie, better known as Madonna's husband, returns to the genre he knows best, the British gangster comedy. Just like his first two films, Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels and Snatch, RocknRolla features a motley crew of crooks and criminals, all trying to get their hands on a large sum of money.
For your sakes, you can hold your breath for as long as it takes my kettle to boil. All right, see ya.
The story moves at breakneck speed as it keeps adding new plot twists and new characters.
7 million euros. Call the accountant.
You need 7 million euros.
7 million.
Well, what do you want?
You.
Dance?
You're a dancer.
Am I a dancer?
I've got some work. 7 million euros, and it won't be protected.
Is this a robbery? Yes, it is a robbery. Where's reverse?
You have to lift up the knob and the gear stick.
Oh, yeah.
It's all flashy, funny and fun, but it will take you a while to get past the Cockney accent.
That's the third time this year.
I'm dead, Pete. Dead people don't like company.
Your boy ain't dead, is he?
Find him.
We got your boy. You might want to hose him down. He smells like a rotten goat.
Madola found like this CD just lying in a locker.
On the floor there?
Yeah, and it's these files, man. I'm not comfortable with this.
It was just lying there.
Earlier this year, directors Joel and Ethan Coen won a much-deserved Oscar for Best Picture for their violent masterpiece, No Country for Old Men. The brothers' new film, Burn After Reading, is an offbeat comedy about a pair of dimwits who try to extort an ex-CIA analyst. As you'd expect, the duo's plans go terribly wrong.
Not gonna go off, is it?
Compared to the extraordinary No Country for Old Men, Burn After Reading does seem like an inconsequential picture. But if you can take away your urge to make comparisons and enjoy Burn After Reading on its own, you may find it to be a rather delightful crime caper. There are also strong comic performances by Frances McDormand, George Clooney, John Malkovich, Tilda Swinton, and yes, even Brad Pitt.
That's fantastic.
저는 못 살당했어. 진상을 밝혀야 하네. 조심해. 시간은 몸을 바꾸니까.
The Guideposts may not be your perfect horror film, but it still stands above others in the genre. The story takes place on the border between North and South Korea, which is lined with guardposts. When one guardpost fails to send regular signals to its headquarters one night, the headquarters send in soldiers from the neighboring guardpost to investigate. There, the soldiers discover that everyone is dead, save for one soldier who's too traumatized to speak. Director Ko Soo-chung does a good job of keeping the tension up and distributing the chills and surprises throughout the film until its big bang finale. Ordinary moviegoers may reel from the gory images of severed bodies and rotting limbs, but gorehounds and horror fans will lap it up. Also opening this week is the wuxia animation from Hong Kong, Storm Riders Clash of the Evils. Based on the popular Feng Wan comic series, it features the voices of Nicholas Tse and Richie Run. The animation, unfortunately, is mediocre at best, offering nothing more than what one could get on TV. The characters are weak, the dialogue indifferent, and the numerous swordplay start to blur into one after the halfway mark. Okay. All right, welcome back to RazorPop. Now, we will be talking about Salawati, which is a new film that tackles a very sensitive topic of race relations in Singapore. Now, tell us what happens in the movie.
Well, basically, Salawati is the story of this young Malay girl whose brother drowns under tragic circumstances. And there's some question about whether or not someone could have helped. And the story is basically how her family deals with this tragedy. And there are also a couple of parallel stories with a group of Indian couriers and a Chinese family. And these stories eventually intersect. And that's the flow of the film.
Well, one of the mysteries in the story is that we don't know what actually happened and who might have helped the boy while he was drowning, right?
Yes.
We are given clues that the person who tried to save the drowning boy could have been a Chinese man or an Indian man. And of course the boy was Malay, and obviously it was a deliberate choice on your part to have these different characters to be of the three different races.
Yeah, honestly though, I didn't set out to make a racial statement. I really wasn't trying to do that. I've always been fascinated by the racial dynamic of Singapore, coming in from the outside and seeing how well this multi-ethnic society gets along. So I think it sort of evolved from this tragic incident. The fact that the other races were involved were as much my fascination with the racial makeup of Singapore and the various languages that exist here. And so in developing the story, it was just kind of natural for me to bring these different groups in. Eventually, I see now, perhaps it was unintentional, or I just didn't realize it, I see now why it does reflect a certain racial component beyond my initial intention.
Okay. Fish, tell us about your character.
Basically, I play an insurance guy. His name is Mr. Chan, and he has a wife and a son. And somehow he gets involved in the story. I mean, in the main story, in the tragedy. Yeah.
Now, I have to say there were certain, for lack of a better word, stereotypes.
Okay.
In the movie about the different communities. For instance, the Chinese man was seen as a very hardworking, a little bit materialistic.
I prefer to use the word focused.
Focused, yeah. Almost
focused.
to the extent of neglecting his family in order to make money.
Yeah.
As a Chinese actor playing that character, do you think that it stereotypes the Chinese to some extent?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I mean, like, I see Chan as a family guy, a father and a husband, doing his very best, to provide for the family,
Right.
Yeah, I mean, any guy, of any race or religion or culture would do that, Yeah.
Okay. What about you, Kuganesh? Tell us about your character.
Well, my character is just a basic delivery driver or rider, I can say the word. Just a happy-go-lucky guy. I had a couple of friends, and during that point, some misunderstanding. Because I'm more a bit of happy-go-lucky guy, so there are some things which was misunderstanding between me and the main guy, Kumar, the main driver. So
Raj. Yeah.
Raj, yeah. Sorry, I'm using the actual word. Raj. So that's what it's going. My character is about a small character.
Your character's kind of a smart aleck.
That's what he says. Exactly.
And what do you think of Mark's depiction, portrayal of the Indian community? Because in some ways, I mean, there are images of the Indian characters going to bars and getting drunk.
Yeah.
Do you think that that came close to stereotyping the Indian community? Because those were the only Indian characters that we got to meet in the film.
Right.
Actually, that's not true.
Were there others?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, there was. There was the doctor.
There was a doctor, and there was
the
also
doctor.
the successful businessman who bought the insurance policy.
That's right. Played by
by Ramesh Panikkar.
Ramesh Panikkar, yeah. But the main characters seem to revolve around.
Yes, if you ask me previously, there were some fights and but nowadays I don't find it that way. When you go to a club and all this, there are people who enjoy themselves. There are some understandings, but there are. It's very minimal, but there are some 1 or 2 fights, But with Mark, he has his own visual. There's a character and the story, if it's going like that, so we just follow it.
Well, let's stay on the word stereotype. I'm not afraid of the word stereotype, and I'm not at all uncomfortable with somebody saying this is a stereotype, if in fact the stereotype is based on a fairly common and well-known type of person. I mean, it's like saying you can't make a gangster's film because a gangster is a stereotype that exists. There are, Fish's character is based on a lot of men I know who are so focused on their work that they sometimes neglect their family. Not just in Singapore. I lived in Japan for 4 years, and this kind of thing happens. Now, to avoid using that kind of a character because you're afraid that someone will say, oh, that's a stereotype, I think is a disservice to the art. But I try to avoid making him a caricature. In other words, just sort of a silly depiction of this, the point where everything is so exaggerated that it's not an accurate reflection of this type of person. A stereotype, if it exists and it is a familiar and the kind of person, I know people like that. I'm not saying that all Chinese are like that any more than I would say all Indians are this way, but certain characters are, and I try to bring a level of realism to these characters, both in the writing and in the shooting, that was honest. Now, again, I have heard that word stereotype a lot, and I'm not too uncomfortable with it.
Okay, I find it very interesting that you're a Caucasian and you're not born and bred in Singapore, but you've decided to make a film about Singapore, touching on an issue that's very close to our hearts. And this isn't the first time, of course. I think like 2 years ago, Graham Streeter, also an American, made a film called Cages. That was a Singapore drama. And then recently we had another American guy called Tony Curran, who made a film about the Hungry Ghost Festival, also about Singapore. And by the way, this is a new development. I mean, we've rarely had Americans coming into.
Okay.
Why Singapore?
I've lived here for a decade, and so I probably know more about Singapore now, having lived here for the last 10 years, than I would if I went back to the U.S. I'd be familiar, but it's changed a lot. So this is my home now, and the way I look at it, I was just making a film about the place I live. As far as I've had this question before in different forms, but sometimes it takes, when we grow up with something and we're surrounded by it, we lose sight of its significance and its beauty simply because it's so familiar to us. And sometimes it is an outsider who comes in and makes us look at it again. I mean, I've had comments, particularly with some people in the Malay community, because of my depiction of some of the rights of Islam in the film, which I was very, very sensitive about.
Yeah. What did they say?
Well, they were saying and I did a lot of research with this, and this is something because religious issues are very sensitive in any culture. But I had comments like for instance, the washing of the body and the respect that Muslims have for the body after death. They thought it was beautifully depicted, and they said, I don't think of it that way so much, but your film reminded me of what a beautiful and respectful tradition this is. And that's the kind of compliment that makes me feel good. But by the same token, someone could go to my hometown, a place I grew up and I take for granted, and I had a man once point out to me how beautiful the corn where I grew up. I grew up basically in corn country. How beautiful the sea of corn was. And, I had to look at it again. I thought, you know, it is kind of beautiful. So I think one of the reasons Americans come in here, not just Americans, but Westerners to some degree, we're fascinated by this culture. Singapore is an amazing place, and there is so much going on here. And, you know, like I said, the languages, the different ethnic backgrounds, all the traditions and so forth. For me, somebody who grew up in the Midwest, to see this sort of diversity all working together, and you know, the good side and the bad side, that's fascinating. So, sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean, you've lived here for 11 years. Do you think that the filmmakers and the artists and the musicians or writers in Singapore sort of take full advantage of this thing that you've taken full advantage of, which is, you know, talking about race relations and because frankly, I mean, I've never seen a film quite like yours. I think, like I said before, I think a lot of filmmakers stay away from that topic because they're afraid they would offend somebody. But you've gone ahead and you know.
And offended a lot. No, I don't know. No, I don't know. I think, for me, the film always starts with a story. You know, whether or not they take advantage of all the different cultural aspects of Singapore, I don't know. If they're there and they fit into the story, I think they should. If they don't fit into the story, it would be a disservice to the film to try to squeeze them in. It just happened in the way I wrote this story.
Right.
It worked. I think I really like the way the Singaporean film industry is developing, and I honestly believe that today this is the time. This literally now in the past few years and the next few years are going to be the time when film historians in Singapore a few years from now, they'll look back and they'll look at this time as a very, very important time. This is when all these new young talents were emerging and you were getting people from the outside coming in. Sometimes you don't realize it because you're right in the middle of it, but this is a time when people are going to look back on this time and go, that was when Singapore film really, really started to come into its own.
Well,
it'll take time, but I really believe that.
I think that's a very interesting point. Very quickly, what do you think of the film?
What I think of the film?
Yeah, are you satisfied with how it turned out?
Yeah, largely. By and large, I think it is in terms of, I mean, the nature of the film is not like. Personally, I'm an action movie kind of guy.
Yeah.
I go watch action movies, you know. So, yeah, I mean, but this is not an action movie. This is not a comedy. It does have a comedic element, but generally the mood is somber and all that. So I would say, knowing that, going to see this movie, I enjoyed it.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about you, Kuganesh? Are you satisfied with the results?
I'm personally satisfied. Thanks to you.
Now tell the truth. Tell the truth.
No, I'm personally satisfied with the movie because I've seen the movie also. Let the audience, let the people see and let them judge by themselves. How do they feel about the movie? But I find it's a very good.
Okay, we have to end soon. Any last thoughts?
Not really. I mean, I just thanks a lot for having us here. It's always fun to discuss this and to discuss these kind of things. So I appreciate it.
Okay, audience, it's up for you to watch it and decide what you think of the film. Salawati opens tomorrow at 3 cinemas, I believe?
Yes, 3. Golden Village.
Golden Village Cinemas, and you should be able to catch it at, I think, Vivo.
Tampines, Yishun, and Vivo City.
Tampines, Yishun, and Vivo City. Thank you for joining us. Stick around for Rage. Bye!